Mijn naam is Thebe Sarildes, u heeft het gehoord. Mevrouw met een moeilijke naam word ik wel eens genoemd bij de TU Delft. Ik ben een Hurk, dat heet Hollandse Turk. Ik heb het zelf uitgevonden. Ik ben in 1983 naar Nederland gekomen voor mijn masters, nadat ik afgestudeerd was in Istanbul als architect. En sinds die tijd ben ik hier. En ik ben trots dat ik Nederlandse ben. Vanaf 1993 heb ik een leerstoel bij de TU Delft. Dat heet Technische Ontwerpen en Informatica. In die tijd zijn we al in 1993 begonnen met informatica toepassingen, technieken en methoden te introduceren bij onderwijs en onderzoek. Doen we nog steeds. Er is nu een hype, zoals u weet, overal digitalisering, maar we deden het al. Vorige keer, 17 september, hebben we met 2 andere medewerkers gesproken over de prestaties in het ontwerp. Theoretische achtergronden, een paar voorbeelden heb ik laten zien. En vandaag ga ik over de steden praten. Prestaties van steden, smart city. En kan een stad slim zijn? Wil ik een beetje met u gedachten wisselen en een paar dingen laten zien met voorbeelden. Dit is het. Ik wil eerst beginnen met de geschiedenis van steden, veranderende steden, technologie, invloed en transformaties, ICKT en smart city, trends in de toekomstige steden en zal ik later op ingaan. Singapore als voorbeeld van een slimme stad met conclusies zal ik beëindigen. Ik weet niet of er mensen zijn die vorige keer de lezing bijgewoond hebben. Zo niet. Architectuur zoals wij beschouwen heeft te maken met alfa, beta, gamma wetenschappen. Beta-wetenschapper heeft te maken met de objectieve wereld van feiten en logica, vertegenwoordigd door de rationele verstand. Alfa-wetenschapper heeft te maken met de subjectieve wereld van schoonheid en moraal, vertegenwoordigd door de artistiek-intuïtieve ziel. En gamma-wetenschapper beschouwt de interesses van maatschappij en cultuur. Als architect en bouwer, als je in staat bent om alle deze wetenschappen in je werk te presenteren, doordringen, dan ben je een succesvolle architect. De meest succesvolle architecten zijn degenen die dat alle 3 de wetenschappen beheersen. Maar ons streven is goed presterende, duurzame gebouwen en steden. Zoals jullie weten, steden en gebouwen zijn de belangrijkste langdurige elementen van onze cultuur. En tevens zijn de grootste nalatenschap voor de toekomst. Ze spelen absoluut een belangrijke rol op deze planeet. En als we kijken naar cultuur, het is een dynamisch fenomeen die constant verandert. Er zijn geen cultuurloze societies, maar er zijn 4 hoofddomeinen waar de cultuur beïnvloeden. Dat zijn de omgevingsfactoren, geografische ligging, dergelijke, historische factoren, contact met andere culturen, sociaal, economisch, ecologisch en technologische ontwikkelingen die we nu gaan kijken. Dit is een voorbeeld van een kleine nederzetting van middeleeuwen die gemaakt is voor voetgangers en voor paard en wagen. Het is Rotterdam op den Taber in Duitsland. Zoals u ziet, sorry, doe het niet. Het is een ommuurde stad. 'S Avonds gaan de poorten dicht. En er is altijd een marktplein waar de mensen elkaar kunnen ontmoeten. Er zijn stadspoorten en vestingsmuur voor de veiligheid. We hebben ook in Nederland fantastische, prachtige vestingsteden. Het heeft te maken met geografische ligging van dit land natuurlijk. En ik vind die spreekwoord heel erg passend hier in dit land. God schiep de aarde, de Nederlanders, Nederland. Dat is werkelijk een man-made land. Het is een prachtig land, moet ik zeggen. Daarom heb ik gezegd, ik ben trots dat ik Nederlandse ben. Ook deze vestingsteden zijn niet ommuurd, misschien op die manier wat we in Rotterdam op den Taber gezien hebben, maar veiligheid en water zijn belangrijke elementen in deze vestingsteden. Maar ook in andere delen van Europa, in Oost-Europa, West-Europa, overal zien we dat de middeleeuwse steden, die heeft altijd een marktplein waar de mensen elkaar ontmoeten. Nog steeds deze ontmoetingen gebeuren in deze steden, goed bewaarde steden. Maar meer en meer gaan die ontmoetingen op de sociale media gebeuren tegenwoordig. Dit zijn voorbeelden van Moorse Spanje. Prachtige, mooie, nauwe straten die ook weer gemaakt zijn voor voetgangers, voor paard en wagen. Maar binnen een aantal eeuwen zijn de steden enorm veel veranderd. Dat heeft grotendeels, er zijn natuurlijk wel een heleboel andere invloeden, maar technologische ontwikkelingen, zoals de ontwikkeling van een auto in 1920, of snelle vliegtuigen, treinen en dergelijke, heeft, denk ik, mede veroorzaakt dat deze steden steeds meer metropolen en megasteden aan het worden. Hier ziet u 10 steden, hoe ze in de afgelopen 30, 40, hoogstens 50 jaar veranderd zijn. Ja, deze veranderingen wellicht zien we niet zozeer in Nederland. Natuurlijk, onze steden zijn ook aan het veranderen. Maar zo'n grote verschil zien we niet meer wellicht in West-Europa. Maar in de rest van de wereld, zoals met name in het oostelijke landen, zien we dat heel duidelijk. Deze veranderende steden heeft ook, naar mijn inziens, probleem met de verdwijnende identiteiten die door de globalisering komt. Weet u wellicht welke steden zijn deze? Kunt u herkennen? Oké. Dat zijn de 4 steden in 4 verschillende continenten. Maar ze lijken allemaal op elkaar een beetje. Deze veranderingen en de doorgaande globalisering en overbevolking veroorzaakt deze grote problemen in de wereld. Sowieso, u weet dat allemaal beter dan ik, klimaatverandering, stijging van de zeespiegel, die erg impact kan hebben voor ons land. Lucht- en waterverontreiniging, oceaandegradatie, uitputting van fossiele grondstoffen. Veiligheid is een andere belangrijke ding. Giftig afval, afvoer van vast afval en vermindering van de biodiversiteit en uitsterven van soorten zijn de globale problemen. Dat zijn de harde problemen. En er zijn ook zachte problemen. Weer de opkomst van megasteden, grootschalige migratie, de oorlogen, ongelijkheid, armoede, honger, gebrek aan voedsel. Kansen op werk is wel steeds moeilijker aan het worden, omdat de concurrentie erg groter aan het worden is. Er zijn gezondheidsproblemen, met name in de steden. Er was 2 dagen geleden een artikel van BBC, het was een hele lange artikel, en die had het echt over deze gezondheidsproblemen in de grote steden. Gebrek aan drinkwater en veiligheid, cyberaanvallen, terrorisme en dergelijke. En steden vertrouwen misschien te veel op externe bronnen en zullen waarschijnlijk altijd de consumenten zijn van grondstoffen. In de hedendaagse steden, het is het feit, de steden zijn centrum van beschouwingen en centrum van de kenniseconomie. Want stedelijke gebieden genereren meer dan 90% van de wereldeconomie. Ze spelen een belangrijke rol op sociaal-cultureel gebied. Meer dan 50% van de wereldbevolking op dit ogenblik wonen in steden. Maar volgens de schattingen, verwachtingen, 2/3 van de wereldbevolking tegen 2050 zullen in grote metropoolsteden wonen. In Europa zijn al 75% van de mensen wonen in stedelijk gebied. En dat zal volgens de schattingen vanaf volgend jaar 80% zijn. En steden gebruiken meer dan 65% van de energie in de wereld. En 70% wereldwijde uitstoot van broeikgassen. Ze dragen weer gezondheidsproblemen, zoals, u weet het, zelfs afgelopen tijd was er ook op de radio en ook bij de BBC-nieuws hadden ze het over. Zelfs de diabetesziekte komt ook door de luchtvervuiling en drukte in de steden, meer stress, minder beweging wellicht enzovoort. En heel veel stedelijke bewoners gebruiken antidepressief pillen, volgens de onderzoekers. Dat merken we waarschijnlijk niet, omdat Nederland een stadstaat is in feite. We hebben niet zo'n groot verschil tussen stedelijk gebied en de landelijk gebied, wellicht. Maar in andere steden is het wel erg zichtbaar. Dus de steden hebben een enorme impact op het milieu. En voor de duurzaamheid en ecologische verantwoordelijkheid in steden, er moet wel veel aandacht besteed worden naar gebouwen, energie en mobiliteit. Maar net zo belangrijke sector is ook de ICT. Hoe kunnen we deze ICT-producten, systemen en netwerken inzetten in het verbeteren van onze stedelijke omgeving? In dit opzicht de belangrijke drijfkracht is de ICT. ICT is een belangrijke drijfkracht achter de toename van productiviteit en innovatie. Het is een technologie voor duurzame oplossingen in alle netwerken van stedelijk gebied, zoals gebouwen, mobiliteit, energieproductie, riolering enzovoort, enzovoort. En het is ook de katalysator voor veranderingen in persoonlijke en werk- en gemeenschapsleven en fundamentele voorwaarden voor duurzame economische ontwikkelingen. Maar deze ontwikkelingen gaan in een zeer, zeer snel tempo in feite. En in de toekomst zal het veel sneller gaan, denk ik, met alle voor- en nadelen. Even snel, in 1978 was de eerste keer term IT gebruikt, informatietechnologie. Daarna is de communicatie aan toegevoegd, hebben we het over ICT. En we hebben ook in onze veel papers geïntroduceerd informatie, communicatie en kennistechnologie door gebruik van verschillende computational intelligence technieken. En tegenwoordig in de smart cities, intelligent cities, er zijn heel veel namen. De IoT, Internet of Things, zijn onmisbaar in smart cities. Maar even kijken waar we het over hebben. Afgelopen jaar hebben we heel veel. Er is geen dag voorbij gaat dat op de radio dat u niet hoort big data en artificial intelligence enzovoort. Waar gaat het over? De data is in feite voorstelling van feiten. En dit geraus, kan een data zijn. Dat heeft geen betekenis. Zodra we aan de data betekenis, begrippen en patronen en relaties toevoegen, dan hebben we het over informatie. En kennis is informatie plus. Dat is informatie gevuld met intelligentie. En als u kijkt naar deze piramide, en ons doel is om te komen naar de wijsheid, de metakennis. En dat is de kennis met IQ, EQ, cognitie, comprehensie. Daarom noemen we dat kennis. Want met data kunnen we niet veel. Ons doel is om daar kennis te extraheren. Er zijn ICT en IoT zijn belangrijke componenten in slimme steden. En zoals u ziet in deze beide schema's, ICT heeft een heleboel te maken met de economie, met de overheid, met maatschappij en environment. En ze zijn toepasbaar van parking, smart dit, smart dat, alles is smart tegenwoordig. Van parking tot en met waste management, afval en dergelijke, overal toepasbaar.
Stel je een wereld voor waarin allerlei soorten producten, van auto's en huishoudelijke apparatuur tot industriële windturbines, real-time kunnen communiceren over hun status en gebruik. Met deze producten hebben fabrikanten de mogelijkheid om fouten op te sporen en te herstellen, zelfs al voordat de gebruiker het probleem heeft opgemerkt. Of wat dacht u van een wereld waarin de gezondheidszorg thuis plaatsvindt in plaats van in het ziekenhuis? Doktoren kunnen hun patiënten 24/7 monitoren en zorg op afstand leveren. Dit leidt tot meer vrije bedden en stelt chronisch zieke patiënten in staat om een normale leven te leiden. Of stelt u zich een wereld voor waarin alles om ons heen, van gebouwen en bruggen tot wegen en treinrails, situaties kunnen aanvoelen en kunnen reageren op veranderende omstandigheden. Slimme steden hebben de potentie om regeringen en de privésector te helpen en om de grootste problemen van samenlevingen aan te pakken, inclusief files, vervuiling en criminaliteit. Maar waarom daar stoppen? Het volgen van activa over verschillende continenten, het transformeren van de winkelvitrines in intelligente objecten en de controle nemen over energieverbruik. Dit zijn slechts een paar voorbeelden van de dingen die de slimme diensten van Internet of Things kunnen verwezenlijken. Het Internet of Things transformeert nu al industrieën over de hele wereld. Visionaire bedrijven krijgen hierdoor de informatie en inzichten om geld te besparen, risico's te verminderen en hun klanten beter van dienst te kunnen zijn. Maar bovenal biedt het vergaande mogelijkheden om geheel nieuwe businessmodellen en productcategorieën te ontwikkelen.
Ja, u heeft het gehoord, in de slimme stad, IoT is onmisbaar technologie. Maar wat bedoelen wij eigenlijk met slimme stad? Wat is smart city? Ik heb natuurlijk heel wat gezocht in de literatuur. Harrison et al. Ze zeggen, slimme stad is een instrumented, interconnected en intelligent city. En instrumented verwijst naar de mogelijkheid om gegevens uit de echte wereld vast te leggen en te integreren door het gebruik van sensoren, meters, apparaten en persoonlijke apparaten. Interconnected betekent de integratie van deze gegevens in een computerplatform, dat de communicatie van dergelijke informatie tussen de verschillende stadsdiensten mogelijk maakt. En intelligent verwijst naar het opnemen van complexe analyses, modelleren, optimaliseren en visualiseren van diensten voor betere operationele beslissingen te nemen. Vandaar wil ik even met u kijken naar de term intelligentie, menselijke intelligentie. Volgens de Oxford Dictionary het vermogen om kennis en vaardigheid te verwerven en toe te passen. Een belangrijke wetenschapper op dit gebied zegt Sternberg, menselijke intelligentie is onderverdeeld in 3 subsets. Dat is creative, analytic en practical. Maar Socrates zei, ik weet dat ik intelligent ben, omdat ik weet dat ik niets weet. Wat is dan de IQ? Het is een maat voor de menselijke intelligentie en uitgedrukt in een getal. Intelligentiecoëfficiënt of IT-test vergelijken uw prestaties met andere mensen van uw leeftijd die dezelfde test afleggen. Deze test meet niet alle soorten van intelligentie. Volgens een van de belangrijke wetenschappers hier, een Amerikaanse psycholoog, die zei er zijn 9 verschillende soorten intelligentie, volgens zijn theorie. Maar hier ga ik daar niet op in. En de EQ is de vermogen om je emoties bewust te zijn, te beheersen en uit te drukken, en om verstandig en empathisch om te gaan met interpersoonlijke relaties. Nu is de vraag, hoe kunnen we IQ en EQ van een stad meten in termen van analytische, praktische en creatieve intelligentie? Een van de belangrijke wetenschappers van Imperial College London, Sir Peter Hall, x aantal jaren geleden toen ik in de Vromraad zat, stad Amsterdam heeft uitgenodigd hem om lezing te geven, omdat hij net het boek Creative Cities publiceerde. In zijn lezing had hij over de creatieve steden. Dat zijn die steden die openstaan voor migranten, die de innovatie en creativiteit in een stad brengen. Historisch gezien zijn steden altijd geweest waar mensen elkaar ontmoeten, communiceren en ideeën hebben. En het zijn de ideeën die waar welvarende plekken leiden. En hij noemde een aantal creatieve steden zoals Parijs, Londen, New York en dergelijke. En steden zijn die, zegt hij, waar de ideeën ruimte krijgen. Dat zijn de creatieve plaatsen en dat zijn de plaatsen waar onderzoek en ontwikkeling plaatsvinden. En hij noemde uitstekende universiteiten en ook de onderzoeksinstituten zoals in Duitsland, Max Planck Instituut, Fraunhofer Instituut en dergelijke. U hoort het waarschijnlijk ook in de literatuur of in de media continu over dit city, dat city, sustainable city, energy efficient city, connected city, digital city, autonomous city enzovoort. Ik wil hier even doorgaan met 4 verschillende futuristische ontwikkelingen van architecten, hoe ze met de toekomst van de steden omgaan en ook eerder genoemde harde en zachte problemen in de steden. Hoe gaan deze steden getransformeerd worden? Wat zijn de trends? Met name eco-friendly, sustainable, self-sufficient, autonomous cities wordt het genoemd. In Nederland eigenlijk hebben we al in Amsterdam soort, het is geen stad, maar woningen, drijvende woningen. Het is erg Nederlands misschien. Dit is een voorstel voor een hele stad, self-sufficient. Dat zijn speculaties, misschien klinkt het vergezocht. Maar ja, de technologie ontwikkelt zich heel snel. Een andere in Parijs gevestigde Belgisch architect Vincent Callebaut. Hij heeft een concept ontwikkeld voor Parijs 2050. De bestaande gebouwen omzetten naar energie-efficiënt, ecologisch. Een ander voorbeeld weer van Vincent Callebaut. Het is een futuristische stad, maar hij wil het maken van afval, met name de oceaanafval. En de laatste is van April Design Studio, die ontwikkeld is voor de stad Seoul in Korea. Het is een verticale voorstel voor een boerderijontwerp in het centrum van de stad. Want in Verre Oosten het grootste probleem is de voedsel natuurlijk. Grotendeels van hun voedsel komt van elders. Zo, in Seoul gaan ze dat bouwen. Dat klinkt misschien erg vergezocht, futuristische, die 4 onderwerpen. Maar ja, ik denk dat we in de toekomst, nabije toekomst, kan het misschien gewoon ontwerp zijn. Maar met 2 benen op de grond, ook in Nederland, in Rotterdam, hebben we te maken met groene daken en groene gevel in hoogbouw. Maar ook elders, zoals in Parijs, in heel veel gebouwen, op het dak van het gebouw worden de vegetables en voedsel geproduceerd. Nu wil ik graag even Singapore als een voorbeeld nemen. Singapore is, zoals u weet, vanaf 1965 enorme ontwikkeling doorgemaakt. Het is een eiland-stadstaat in het oosten. Jaren geleden, ze zijn heel bewust geïnvesteerd in de ICT en informatietechnologie. Op het ogenblik bijvoorbeeld ETH, Zurich, MIT hebben allemaal filialen in Singapore over de stad, Smart City opgezet. ETH Zurich betaalt per jaar 20 miljoen Zwitserse frank voor dat onderzoekscentrum in Singapore, ook MIT. 2 van mijn medewerkers werken daar trouwens. Er is een hele leuke National Geographic film op de YouTube, u kunt het zien, City of the Future Singapore. Daar is ook heel wat informatie te krijgen. Ik heb het hier geschreven, u kunt het kijken. Maar Singapore is heel bewust begonnen, heb ik al gezegd. Want de president van de Singapore heeft gezegd, ik wil een smart nation. Het is niet alleen smart city, maar smart nation. En daar hebben ze heel bewust strategie voor ontwikkeld. In Singapore van oudsher, omdat de ruimte heel erg schaars is, het is een stadstaat in een eiland, heel veel multifunctionele gebouwen worden neergezet. Waarschijnlijk de meeste jullie hebben Singapore gezien. Zijn er mensen Singapore heel goed kennen? Oké. Nou, ik zou echt wel aanraden om een keertje leuke vakantie te hebben in Singapore. Het is een wel bijzonder land. Dit is wat u ziet hier, is ontworpen door architect Moshe Safdie. Want die hele Marina Bay Sand complex is doorontwikkeld met een paar architecten. Dit is een zwembad op de 57e verdieping. Langwerpig, 150 meter lang. Het is een skypark genoemd, dit complex met veel functionaliteit zoals casino, museum, theater, heel wat restaurants, vergaderzalen en dergelijke. En in Singapore willen ze leefbare stad zijn en heel wat green buildings wordt neergezet. Dit zijn een paar voorbeelden. En dit is een laatste voorbeeld, geïnspireerd van de rijstvelden in gebouwenontwerp in Singapore. Hier heb ik een video. Toen het besloten werd dat de Singapore Smart City zou worden, ze hebben deze mevrouw, architect Cheng Koon Hin, gevraagd. Zij is de CEO van de Urban Redevelopment of Singapore Authority. En hier heb ik een video hoe ze haar ontwerpen realiseert en hoe ze de prestaties vanaf de conceptfase eigenlijk met behulp van computational tools en techniques en methoden verwezenlijkt. Oh, geluid is er niet. Kunt u dat even hoger zetten? Kan het hoger? Ik hoor u niet. Ik hoor hem niet. Nou. Jammer.
At
Ja,
smart in
That-
4 areas.
moment.
As an architect planner, actually I plan and build many of the towns that you live in. And I would very much like to build a smart town that's livable, efficient, sustainable, and safe for you. We are going to look at smart in 4 areas. Smart planning, smart environment, smart experience,
No.
What is smart planning? As an architect
Nou. Die technologie. Sorry. Nou, hier vertelt ze eigenlijk hoe de data verzameld werd over dat gebied. En hoe de prestatieaspecten van wind, zon en alles geanalyseerd werden om te dienen als input voor het hele ontwerp van de regio enzovoort. Oké, gaan we maar verder, want dit wordt niks. Oké. Singapore heeft ook gebouwen neergezet. En ze zijn hard bezig met het ontwikkelen van de verticale landbouw. Omdat 93% van hun voedsel komt uit het buitenland. Ook zoals in Japan. In Japan komen de 99% van hun voedsel uit het buitenland. Dus ze zijn echt afhankelijk van de andere landen. Daardoor ontwikkelen ze dit soort van concepten, verticale landbouw te kunnen doen en slimme landbouwoplossingen. Dit is een wereldprimeur door een Singaporese 2 wetenschappers. Dat is mevrouw Lee Mun Wai en Mark Wong, bioloog. Ze hebben gezamenlijk een technologie ontwikkeld voor een 3D-printed voedsel volgens de behoeften van de target group. Er is een gadget. Hier. Ja. Ze hebben zo'n horloge ontwikkeld. Die horloge meet wat voor tekorten, vitamines, mineralen of bloeddruk of wat dan ook u heeft. En op maat, deze informatie gaat via de smartphone naar de 3D-printer. En daar wordt op maat gemaakte voedsel voor u geprint. Ja, of we dat allemaal willen of niet, we willen heel graag naar een leuk restaurant om te ontspannen. Maar als dat nodig zou zijn, zoals in Singapore, met name met de oudere mensen, dat is de target group, op maat gemaakte voedsel willen ze produceren. Er is ook heel veel aandacht voor de harde en zachte maatschappelijke, menselijke aspecten in de slimme stad van Singapore. Bijvoorbeeld, ze hebben een digital clinic opgezet voor de oudere mensen om hun technologische geletterdheid te bijwerken. En ook voor kinderen, met name de kleine kinderen, zoals op de basisscholen. Ze leren hoe om te gaan met programmeren, algoritmes en dergelijke. Maar ook hier in Nederland, er zijn ook een aantal basisscholen begonnen zijn met programmeerlessen voor kinderen. Dus de kinderen zijn natuurlijk de toekomst, een belangrijke element voor onze maatschappij. Singapore heeft ook 50% van hun drinkwater vanuit het buitenland importeerd. En zij willen de zeewater gebruiken, ze doen het al, zeewater gebruiken om drinkwater van te maken. En dan voor de regenwateropslag hebben ze reservoirs gemaakt. Dit is weer een ontwikkeling in Singapore, Airbus project. Ze hebben drones ontwikkeld voor transport van goederen en later met het oog op mensen, hoe de drones mensen kunnen transporteren. In oktober deze maand, een van de drones kon tot 7 kilo aan pakketten leveren, welke ook als wereldprimeur voor postdiensten beschouwd zijn. Niet in Singapore, dit is niet in Singapore alleen, maar er zijn ontwikkelingen in transporttechnologieën. We weten dat we splashbus hebben hier in Nederland, maar er zijn ook heel wat ontwikkelingen, ideeën over de transporttechnologie voor de slimme stad voor de toekomst. En een van de futuristische transporttechnologieontwikkelingen is dit, door Tahir Ishad. voor een openbaar vervoerproblemen. Ja, het is grappig, het is een beetje gezocht, maar ja. Want grotendeels van de files komen door de ongelukken, zeggen ze. Hoe gaan we met de ongelukken om? Even springen. Maar aan de andere kant, Terraforgia-groep, dus Chinese en de Amerikaanse groep in Massachusetts, ze werken al 10 jaar lang aan het concept van vliegende auto. Ze zouden dit jaar lanceren, maar ik heb niet gehoord dat het echt op de markt gebracht werd, deze vliegende auto. Maar dat was mijn altijd droom toen ik kind was om vliegende auto te hebben. Even met 2 benen op de grond weer. Er zijn ook negatieve effecten van technologie voor de samenleving en voor onze cultuur. Een van de belangrijke wetenschappers, professor Sherry Turkle van MIT, zij is socioloog, antropoloog en psycholoog. Zij heeft een boek geschreven dat heet Alone Together, Why We Expect More from Technology and Less from Each Other. En dat boek is bestseller geworden en zij zei, we hebben een enorm snelle verandering doorgemaakt. En sommige van deze dingen moeten gewoon een beetje worden opgelost. Ik vind dat we het bestaan van technologie niet moeten toejuichen, zonder te bekritiseren dat geen respect toont voor traditionele waarden. Dat vind ik heel leuk om hier te vertellen. Wat zijn de bedreigingen in huidige slimme steden? Technologie moet eigenlijk de mensen verbinden door relaties te creëren. Maar het is altijd als de dubbele kant van de medaille. Op het ogenblik zien we ook in onze eigen maatschappij sociale isolatie, segregatie, vooral bij ouderen eenzaamheid, bedreiging op fysiek en sociale vlak, heel veel individualisme en gebrek aan sociale verantwoordelijkheid en sociale controle. En over de slimme stad. We weten eigenlijk niet genoeg over de slimme stad. Er is beperkte wetenschappelijke kennis beschikbaar over hoe steden intelligent slim kunnen worden gemaakt, met name voor mensen, mensgerichte steden. De nadruk te veel ligt op wellicht technologische kant en meestal commercieel gedreven. En op de zogenaamde big data en artificial intelligence, alsof het de enige ware oplossing zou zijn. En informatie en kennis genereren van deze big data is een uitdaging. En we weten te weinig over mensen, hoe ze omgaan, zich bewegen in de steden. En ook weten we heel weinig over de voorkeuren van onze burgers om leefbare steden te kunnen genereren. Als we opzoomen weer op Nederlandse steden, we hebben te maken met intensivering en aanpassing. Volgens schattingen in Nederland, in de Randstad zullen er 1,5 miljoen meer inwoners zijn. En ook weer volgens de schattingen, 26% van de bevolking in Nederland in 2040 ouder zijn dan 65 jaar. Dus de veroudering, zoals we ook in Singapore zien, zal hier van toepassing zijn. En 1/3 van onze bevolking zal bestaan van niet-Nederlandse afkomst. Westerse en niet-Westerse migranten. En de bouwopgave in West-Europa, maar met name ook in Nederland, de steden hebben voor meer dan 90% betrekking op de bestaande bouwvoorraad. Wat gaan we daarmee doen als architecten, ingenieurs, stedenbouwers, beslissingmakers, beleidmakers? En hoe gaan we daarmee om? Daarom heb ik het ook dat gekke ontwerp laten zien van Vincent Callebaut voor Parijs 2050. Dat zijn de ideeën, maar ja, zo gek is het ook weer niet misschien. En de conclusie is, onze steden moeten worden getransformeerd en vernieuwd. En hoe kunnen we slimme steden ontwikkelen? Door middel van met name participatie van onze burgers. Wellicht moeten we heel wat onderzoek doen en nieuwe concepten ontwikkelen om gezond en gelukkige burgers te creëren met sociale cohesie, hard- en softkanten. Nu kom ik naar de conclusies. Kan een stad dan smart zijn? IQ en EQ hebben. Het is natuurlijk afhankelijk hoe en vanuit welk gezichtspunt gaan we de intelligentie beschouwen en hoe moeten we en volgens welke criteria hoe moeten we met deze slimme steden omgaan. Ja, we kunnen slimme steden ontwikkelen als we de stad als geheel beschouwen met zijn hard- en soft aspecten. Nee, als we de stad enkel als fysieke ruimte beschouwen met te veel nadruk op de harde aspecten. Slimme steden vereisen voortdurende ontwikkeling. Het is een dynamisch proces. Het is niet zo dat nu gaan we beslissen, dit is een slimme stad en zo doen we dat klaar. Zeker niet. Het is een dynamisch proces. Burgers moeten zeker betrokken zijn bij dit proces. En het ontwikkelen van een nieuw aspect, kennis op hard- en soft aspecten, met al dat big data en artificial intelligence, is de noodzaak. Dit is mijn allerlaatste video. Ook weer. Oké. Dit zijn weer de voorspellingen voor de toekomstige steden.
To enhance our living and working environments. Over the years, we have witnessed numerous quantum leap moments which have totally transformed our lives. Today, we are making the next giant stride, the age of the smarter home. At any time and from anywhere, we can now switch on lights, turn up thermostats, unlock the back door using Samsung SmartThings technology. So what can we expect to see in the next 100 years? As city space becomes more squeezed, we will burrow deeper and build higher. Towering megastructures will dwarf today's skyscrapers, while earthscrapers will tunnel 25 stories deep or more. Underwater cities are likely to become a reality, using the water itself to create breathable atmospheres. Doc Brown in Back to the Future said, "Where we're going, we don't need roads." He may have got the year wrong, but his forecast about transport is likely to be correct. Some of us will be travelling the skyways with our own personal flying drones, some strong enough to carry entire homes around the world for holidays. Flexible, smart walls will mean you won't ever need to decorate. LED room surfaces will adapt to suit your mood. When it comes to entertaining, we will download dishes from famous chefs and 3D print everything from gourmet meals to our favourite cakes in minutes. Our working lives will be transformed with holograms, allowing us to attend meetings virtually. Step-in home Medipods will confirm if you are really ill, providing a digital diagnosis and supplying medicine or a remote surgeon if needed. The next giant leap will see Earth as solar century as we start colonizing space. First the moon, then Mars, and then beyond, out into the galaxy. Remember, these are just predictions for the century ahead. But with technical and medical breakthroughs moving apace and an ever-increasing life expectancy, you may not need to take my word for it. You might just be around to see it for yourselves.
Ja, ik zal er zeker niet meer zijn na 100 jaar of na 50 jaar, maar misschien sommigen jullie wel. Nou, hiermee wil ik beëindigen. Wetenschap en technologische ontwikkelingen altijd brengen voor- en nadelen met zich mee, terwijl ze ook heel wat oplossingen kunnen bieden, mits die wetenschap en technologische ontwikkelingen met inachtnemen van de welvaart en voorspoed van de mensheid worden uitgevoerd. Dit was mijn presentatie. Ik wil u heel hartelijk bedanken voor uw aandacht. En nu wil ik het woord aan Piruz Nourian geven. Hij zal veel meer diepgaande kennis leveren over de deelgebieden en details. Dit was overzicht wat ik heb gezegd.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I wish I could deliver this in Dutch, but my Dutch is not that good, not yet. In the next 45 minutes, I hope I can manage to keep it in 45 minutes. I will be talking about configurative design. It's a word I have almost coined for this generative approach to digitalization, and digital transformation in architectural and urban design. I have put a lot of text and links in the slides, so I just want to remind you that I will be sharing the slides publicly. And I'm not going to read through all of those texts, but I usually share the slides so that people can read for themselves. And please don't hesitate to prompt me to speed it up if you feel like it's very slow, because I have put the list of contents on the left. So if you feel like I should speed it up, please prompt me to do so. I would like to start from the definitions I gave in the abstract, the announcement for this lecture. And I would like to highlight some of the keywords, the key concepts. Configurative computational design is first and foremost an interactive approach to spatial design that, among other things, seeks to enhance the quality of living environments by providing, this is the most important concept, a common language for inhabitants, architects, and digital computers to represent, understand, and reflect on spatial organization. The way we put spaces together, we believe that that has an effect on living quality standards, and among other things, on ergonomics, human factors, social interaction potentials, integration, and liveliness. And we want to use this approach to provide or cater for a participatory design approach. We want to make it possible to let people participate in the decision-making process, in the architectural design process and urban design process. That's our goal. And a key concept that kind of brings all these things together, and that's why I've chosen this image, is that human movement in space connects space and time together. And I have a rather mathematical, abstract approach to this problem. And this is the key concept that connects many things together. So if I forget to mention it again, it's the first time. And speaking of movement, I would like to start by describing the terminology of this talk, because I would be talking about rather abstract things. The first principle that I set for myself a long time ago when I started this kind of research is that movement in space and therefore distance are not according to Euclidean geometry, or in other words, in simple words, because we are not ghosts, because we cannot pass through the walls and so on, we have to go through networks from A to B. And so distance is rarely ever the distance of the path as a crow flies. So there are typically longer distances for pedestrians in cities and in buildings in the same way. So the same thing also exists in buildings. If I decide to go from here to the service desk, I cannot just go through a straight line through the walls. I have to walk through a network, in fact. And these networks actually exist, or at least they can be abstracted upon what we call manifolds, two manifolds to be specific in mathematical terms. And this concept, even though it has a fancy name, it's actually a familiar concept. For the same reason that we can present the maps of cities all over the world on two-dimensional pieces of paper, we can also present we can perceive the spaces in an environment, in a built environment, as a two-dimensional space if we look at them at a local scale. So if I'm standing here, it looks like it's a flat space, and it should be flat because I'm a pedestrian, I'm walking on it, it should be flat and horizontal. But if you look at the global shape, it hardly looks like a flat piece of surface. It's not Euclidean in a general sense, but it's Euclidean and flat and planar at a local scale. And we can see this, that it's everywhere locally flat, just like the globe is flat, almost flat everywhere locally, especially the Netherlands. So, and these two things together, they can potentially change our perspective about time and distance and closeness eventually. So if we think about circles, what is a circle? A circle, we say, it's a locus of points whose distance to a certain point called the center is the same and equal to a number called radius. But what if we measure distance in terms of travel time? So if you consider travel time as a measure of distance, which is probably the most universal measure of distance, then adding a bridge somewhere can change that perspective drastically. So we get a different picture of how the built environment is structured in terms of how it feels like in terms of closeness and farness for pedestrians. And this is a principle in, let's say, human geography and urban planning and also our field, which is configurative design, that everything is connected to everything else, but closer things are more connected. And this concept of closeness and connectivity are key concepts in this approach. And this one is an assumption or a belief, you could call it an underpinning principle, that we believe that the shape of the built environment has a serious effect on the way people behave and therefore the way people can produce things together, especially in for instance, environments like offices and so on. The shape of the built environment clearly, at least in our eyes, affects the way, or at least provides or hinders some possibilities for social interaction and kind of shapes the way we behave, especially towards each other. The main matters that I'm concerned with are methodological matters, because I think technological objects have relatively much shorter shelf life than technological matters. This is the kind of the first thing that we can call a modern computer in a sense. It doesn't look modern at all, but it's the first kind of machine that was a programmable machine that could calculate or compute things, and invented by Charles Babbage, the famous inventor. And on the right side, you see the first kind of modern piece of paper or schema or words that can be called a computer program. And it was developed by a mathematician named Ada Lovelace. And the interesting thing about this is that this piece of program, which is kind of officially or conventionally known as the first computer program, even though there are older algorithms, but this is the first modern one, is something that can still be written in a modern programming language like Python and still works. But this object is only a museum object right now. So methodological objects like procedures, algorithms, and mathematical methods have a longer shelf life. And this principle is very important because the whole idea of configurative design is based on what we call discretization of space. And I would like to say that there's nothing inferior or wrong or imprecise about discretization. Mathematically speaking, we can look at discrete models as approximations of continuous models, and vice versa. We can also look at continuous models as approximations of discrete models, because, I mean, if you want to calculate something like an integral or a derivative, which is a concept that comes from continuous mathematics, actually, by using modern computers, you have to discretize them. So there's nothing inferior about them. So, and I usually start with the why. What is the purpose? What do we hope to achieve with configurative design? Well, what I'm seeking here is that, redefining spatial design as a scientific problem-solving process. That's defining a mathematical language, because mathematics is the language of sciences. This mathematical language doesn't have to be boring like arithmetic, but it can also be very intuitive. I will show you examples. It's actually the language of graph theory, first and foremost. And with this mathematical language comes, and this scientific attitude comes, objectivity, which I think is the spirit of the law, generality of, let's say, design regulations, and inclusivity. It can be a process that is transparent and explicit enough so that people can understand it and eventually participate in it. And that's the spirit of new governance models. More specifically, what are the specific things that can be tackled with this approach? I find this spatial ergonomics one of the most important things, because if you compare our field, architecture and, let's say, industrial design to some extent, or urban design, with other fields of engineering, what is the main difference between our field and their fields, like mechanical engineering, structural engineering, is the existence of, or the importance of, spatial ergonomics and human factors in general, and spatial ergonomics in particular. This is a beautiful example from the work of a pioneer in scientific management, Professor Lilian Moller-Gilbert. She was studying so-called she was doing this so-called time and motion studies, which is basically concerned with the human movement when doing some work. In this case, it's a kitchen, but she and her husband were also working on improving efficiency in factories by just tracking the movement of people when they do something. This is perhaps the most famous one. The so-called kitchen triangle comes from this concept. If we observe very closely how someone works in a kitchen, then probably we should make sure that the main objects in the kitchen, whichever they are, they should be configured or arranged in a particular way so that the person can work efficiently. You can take this concept to other let's say, machines or things that move in space, like cars in particular. This is perhaps a very well understood model. If you have to turn with your car and there's not enough space for a turning radius that is convenient for a car, then you're going to have a very, very difficult time parking your car in a parking space. You could say the same about slopes and so on and so forth. So the shape of this environment and the way these spaces are put together has to do with the capabilities of the machine that is moving in the space. And I find it funny sometimes that when we are designing for robots in storage spaces and so on, we are probably sometimes more careful with them because we know what are their capabilities and so on. So I would say we should be also much more careful with human dimensions and human capabilities, especially if you are designing for people with different abilities. People on a wheelchair have a different mobility perspective and so on. And speaking of these human capabilities, again, this is a matter of human factors in something that is called wayfinding or pathfinding. If you look at it from a transport planning point of view or urban design point of view, it's not so that we have something like a universal kind of a shortest path between A and B. It almost always depends on the mode of transportation. So if you're on foot, the shortest path for you is different from when you are riding your car, or it's different from when you are taking the transit or metro or whatever. So the point is, this one is the most famous one. This is called the shortest path, which is based on minimizing the length of this path in meters, let's say. But as you can see, it can be very, very unintuitive and difficult, especially for a newcomer, to find this path or follow even instructions. It gets so confusing. So if we were to take into account something like the ease of wayfinding, or the simplicity of the path, in other words, then we could probably minimize the number of turns and take this one. Or if we were to consider such things as the altitude or the steepness of the roads, then we could get at something like this one, which avoids the slopes as much as possible. But if we were to combine all these things together, then we could find this kind of path, which I call easiest path. This is an algorithm that I published in 2015. and I've implemented in a tool for finding easiest path, because easiest path will shape our perspective about the space in the way a human can perceive the space. And these paths can also be computed in indoor spaces in the same way. So in a way, we look at buildings and cities in the same light, and I sometimes call large buildings, especially indoor cities. So the only difference is that there are walls. I mean, but if we forget about walls just for a second, we can see that it's a space that it's a network space, and there are shortest paths to be found. So our perspective about the space and how easy it is to get to somewhere, and therefore how likely we are to go somewhere, and so on, they all have something to do one way or another with these shortest paths. And if we put all shortest paths together, or we look at the global picture, then we begin to see some interesting things, such as temporal efficiency. If we were to say something about the overall efficiency of a certain built environment, like a building, like an airport or a hospital or any other serious public building, then we could see something like this. So that probability that one person may want to or decides to go from I to J times the distance between I and J, if that probability is high, that distance should be small so that the overall efficiency is high. So this total sum, tells us something about the overall efficiency of the whole environment. If you look at it from the perspective of one point, one location in a city, then this is something that many cities have on their maps. They draw a circle over your location and say you are here, and these are the areas within reach in 5 minutes, for instance. But 5 minutes reach is not going to be a circle as many cities draw on their touristic maps. It's actually going to be something like this. This is from Voxscore. It shows you that the actual, what we call catchment area around you. It has to do with the way you as a pedestrian could find your way. So within 10 minutes time, you can reach up to here, which is much shorter and much smaller than the preconceived Euclidean circle, which makes sense because we cannot fly like a bird from here to wherever we want to go. And if we put many such analyses together, then we begin to see that the shape of the built environment and the location of some important facilities or amenities can really make a big difference. For instance, in this case, I'm looking at the accessibility of the whole neighborhood in terms of having a good access, let's say within 10 minutes walking time or cycling time towards these points of interest. It's an imaginary setup, but imagine if these points of interest are different, providing different kind of services. One is the school of your child, the other one is the train station, and the other one is a grocery store, and so on. You want to be close to all of them at the same time. And therefore, it's important to see for how many people are we providing this good access. So maybe a better location for these would make a better sense. And if you look at this, they can also be facilities of the same kind. Therefore, being close to any of them would be sufficient. Therefore, we do another kind of logical aggregation, then we see a different picture. And if we look at it in a fuzzy setup, then we can see that there's actually a gradient of values of accessibility. We can also differentiate if they're all providing the same service. You can see that they kind of divide a territory amongst themselves. So if they're all grocery stores and you just need to be close to one of them, and if you're very, very close to one grocery store, they may win always because you're nearby, but you might be prepared to walk for longer to get to a better grocery store over there, and then you see a different picture. So this is a map that can change based on the perspective of the person making this map for themselves. And this is a tool also available in the toolkits that I'm going to introduce. The other important thing, so spatial ergonomics, accessibility, and centrality. These are the main issues that we are concerned with in configurative design. What is centrality? Let me put it in a larger perspective. So we often talk about sustainability as if it's only something related to energy expenditure and so on. But what if we make a building that is perfect in terms of insulation and all those new technologies, PV panels and so on, but it's a building that ends up not being used, or it's something in the middle of nowhere where no one uses it. So in fact, no matter how fancy or high-tech it is, when it's not used, it's not sustainable, not socially sustainable, not economically sustainable. And many buildings just end up being empty, just like that. I would argue that probably they're not providing the right service at the right location. Maybe we should study the match between the location and what is happening at that location. Maybe we don't need many office buildings in a particular location. And another scale, you can, this is a better explanation, I hope, for the argument that the environment shapes our behavior. You can clearly see that in this environment, the likelihood of such cliques or such clusters of people talking to each other and socializing with each other is much less than this one, of course. Well, whether this one is better than the other one, I'm not so sure about that, because sometimes you also want to hide from the public to get something done. But in general, the different environments provide different opportunities. So maybe we should have both of them next to each other. But more specifically, there are different kinds of centralities. Perhaps the word is a bit confusing because it sounds like it's about being in the center, but where is the center? That is the main question, in fact. Or what is central? Central is kind of important, we could roughly say. And there are different senses of importance in a network. These are perhaps the most famous archetypical examples. If you, for instance, if you are new to LinkedIn and you want to make a good profile, a well-connected profile, the first thing that comes to mind is that I should make as many connections as possible. So being connected to many people means kind of being important, which is true in a sense. In mathematical terms, we know this as degree centrality, and it is found to be very important in terms of helping with the spread of information, and you actually see that you can see, for instance, in my PhD dissertation, that these places with a high degree centrality, they absorb a lot of random walkers as well. So if we are talking about a city, there are perfect locations for shops. There are going to be many pedestrians passing by. From a different perspective, we can say closeness is the core of centrality. So being close to many, many locations means being central. So, and indeed, this is, I think, very intuitive that being close to many locations is a good reason for placing service areas so that they're reachable for many people, and therefore we can provide spatial justice in a way. And there's another very important sense of centrality called betweenness, which is the number of times a certain space happens to be on a shortest path between two other spaces. And these spaces end up being kind of like bridges, so they are going to be very, very busy roads, and they can be good for placing such things as bars or cafes and so on, but they are going to be very, very busy. So I hope that I'm not giving the impression that red is good and blue is not good, because in fact, if you want peace and quiet, you should avoid these centralities altogether, right? So if you want to live quietly in a residential area, this is good for that. So it's not so that central is always better than non-central. And the last one, which is kind of intuitively very, very simple, but mathematically it's a little bit more involved, is called eigenvector centrality. In simple terms, it means an important person is the one who's connected to important persons. So it's a bit recursive. Or it's almost like saying you can know someone by knowing their friends. That's the same kind of thing. And long story short, it turns out that an eigenvector of a certain matrix associated with a graph tells us about this kind of centrality, which in simple terms indicates influence. So if you want to have a space or position of influence within a network, you should have a high eigenvector centrality. And it's kind of proven that it has an effect. So there was a there was something about the presidential elections in the United States that a study that said Barack Obama in the first round, he had a higher eigenvector centrality than his opponents, so he had been more influential. Anyway, so back to the point, if you look at cities in this light, you will see that the networks provide different kinds of centralities, and contrary to what might seem at the beginning, center is not always at the center, the geographical center. It changes radically when we introduce travel time and also the radius of movement. So it's not so that there's only a single center for a pedestrian or for a cyclist. The city is actually a polycentric structure. You begin to see that there are different centers, not a single center anymore. Also, in terms of other kinds of centralities, like betweenness centrality, we see that there are busy roads for cyclists are different from the busy roads for cars or cyclists who travel faster or longer. And we can see the same thing within buildings. We can look at it in different ways. We can check the centrality of spaces as origins or as destinations. So there are different ways we can look at these things. So I hope I've explained properly the terminology, but here I'm going to add a little bit of detail. Before I go into the details, I must say that our field, computational design, is sometimes referred to as parametric design in a general sense, because for many people it's associated with the tools we use. Yes, we use parametric tools, parametric design tools, but our field is actually a field in which there is a spectrum of paradigms, as to which you can also see that the approaches, like reductionist scientific approach and a more artistic non-reductionist approach to complex design problems. The overarching words or the umbrella terms are procedural design, computational design. I have kind of exaggerated this spectrum to make a point that there are things in between, but I'm looking at the extremes. So parametric design in general is concerned with geometry variations, continuous geometry variations, and in generative design, which is the approach of this workflow configurative design, is based on discrete geometry variations. And yes, both of them have something to do with parameters. In generative design, we work with whole numbers or integer parameters, and in parametric design, we work with real parameters. And therefore, in that sense, they're both kind of parametric. But I find this distinction useful because we see that the methods of construction and also the systems, the value associated to the designs are quite different based on these two approaches. And the one that I'm talking about, the generative design approach, is concerned with topology or configuration, and the other one is concerned with geometry or shape. So what is topology? Topology is a word that is made up of two Greek words. Topos in Greek means location or place, kind of, and logi is the study of space or place. And it interestingly started by a riddle, and other than that interesting thing, it's kind of, if I'm mistaken, not the only field or branch of mathematics that was kickstarted in relation to directly to the built environment. Leonhard Euler, who is kind of known as being one of the most influential or greatest mathematicians of all times, kickstarted this field called graph theory and to some extent topology, which was later developed by Henri Poincaré and other mathematicians. I started this by looking at a riddle or puzzle about a city named of Königsberg. Nowadays it's called Kaliningrad. It's in an oblast of Russia above Lithuania. Back then it was part of the country known as Prussia. So the city had a riddle about 7 bridges connecting different pieces of the city together, and the riddle was whether it was possible to start a journey from one of these, let's say, islands or peninsulas in the city, pass through every bridge only once and come back to where you started, and having passed every bridge only once. And you could say Leonhard Euler kind of ruined the puzzle, which was very helpful for the tourism of the city. He proved that no, it was not possible. But in doing so, he actually kickstarted this interesting field called graph theory, which is the fascinating thing about it is that he started abstracting and reducing and simplifying the shape of the city, making a mathematical model, which is only about the spaces being connected to each other by means of these bridges. So he figured there is nothing more to this. I mean, if you want to solve that kind of a puzzle, we don't need to know the exact shape of the city, the bridges. All that matters is the way they're connected to each other. And that can be even further simplified into something that we nowadays call a graph. We can do the same for buildings. And instead of looking at the walls, we can look at the spaces confined within those walls. And then we can see the topos, and then the graph or the network structure reveals itself, and we can see a much clearer picture. This one should be very, very familiar to you. This is the first map of this kind designed by a graphics designer named of Harry Beck for the underground metro network of London. This is the first one of this kind, and yet we have seen it all over the world. In almost every city around the world, we humans prefer this kind of map over this one. At least I prefer it very much. Because when you're underground, you don't really care about the shape of the path that the train is taking. All you care about is where should I get off and where should I hop on another train and so on. So all the connections are the most important things. You don't care about the shape that much. So the information content of this one can be said to be topological, whereas the other one has geometrical information, which you might not care about. It has even geographical information, like the coordinates. But humans don't think about coordinates, we think rather in this way, in terms of connections. And yes, we can use these mathematical abstractions to truly digitize the subject matter that we are working with, the shape of the built environment and the shape of space in particular. The same way a child can make a Lego model of any building, almost. We can make a digital model with these volumetric pixels or voxels, and then we can kickstart interesting things such as what I call a feed-forward approach, which is basically synthesizing design based on digital analyses or simulations. So we can do simulations from the beginning, we can do analysis from the beginning, and from the beginning we can do the right thing. For instance, this is an imaginary building, by the way, we're not planning to build something over there, but we can look at the building as a shape and see if the building or parts of the building are somehow in the way of neighbors getting their sufficient daylight. They have a right to daylight. There are documents that specify that from TNO, from the government. If you wanted to ensure that the neighbors get their sufficient daylight, could this building in the shape of this building be in the way of them getting their daylight? And so if there are parts of this building obstructing the neighbors, we can remove them from the beginning, and from the beginning we will do the right thing. And in an urban setting, we can see, for instance, the opportunity in the digital or the discrete modeling approach for doing such things, like deciding where should the new hospital healthcare facility locations be, such that everyone within the neighborhood or the city has a reasonable reasonably short access time or travel time to these locations to ensure spatial justice. This could be also police stations. This is something we call a coverage problem in facility location planning. And we can do the right thing from the beginning. So we don't have to first do something and evaluate it. We can do the right thing from the beginning because we start with evaluations and analysis, and we look at the whole thing as a scientific problem-solving matter. The more interesting part, perhaps, is that this process can be a participatory process. This is a game called Blockhood, in which people can build their vision about for the urban design of a neighborhood or a location. And it's a playful game. Even more playful examples exist, such as this one. This is Minecraft, the familiar Minecraft. Perhaps you've seen kids playing with it. It's so easy to build things in this world, and I have seen researchers who make procedures for participatory urban planning only based on Minecraft, because everyone who has an opinion or cares about the environment can get in and start building the things they desire to be built in their environment. So it's very welcoming and very approachable for anybody. Back to the point. So what is the problem? I love this quote. Technology is the solution, but what was the problem really? The problem, once someone asked me, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And that question had a long-term effect on me. I mean, I had a problem I was trying to solve, but I hadn't mentioned it. So these are the problems we are trying to solve. We are trying to make sure that the spatial organization is logical in terms of the right potentials. We are placing things where there is the right potential for the kind of behavior, for the kind of functionality that we intend for the building. And so this is a spatial matter. The temporal matter, which is a matter of efficiency, is accessibility and economical functionality of the building or the built environment. And there are also other concerns about the spatial ergonomics and so on, but mainly these two. So one of the key ideas, this is kind of the dream I started my PhD with, which was whether it was possible to do this. If we look at a building from a mathematical point of view, any existing building or city network and so on, we can kind of, in a rather straightforward systematic way, we can arrive into this kind of representation, a network representation of how things are connected within that building. The question is, can we do the reverse? And why would it be interesting to do the reverse? Because the reverse would mean that we can start from a rather abstract description of what is the functionality of the building, or what is the intended or desired functionality of the building in terms of functional requirements, a program of requirements, the adjacencies or the connections necessary to make that happen, the user experience that is intended. And then we can do these kind of things, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, which, by the way, are the constituent elements of any systematic design process, at least according to Brian Lawson and me. It is necessary to do analysis, synthesis, and evaluation if we want to do a systematic design process. And at the end, we are expected to deliver some drawings and geometric constructs which are going to be very, very concrete. But the question is, how do we get from function to form? We believe, by the way, there's no shame in saying that, we believe that form follows function. So I just thought I should mention it. So if form is supposed to follow the function, how do we actually get to this form? And the idea of configurative design is to combine this in multiple ways. And these multiple ways, I call them feedback approach and feed-forward approach. And I borrowed these terms from the field that I studied before studying architecture, which was control engineering. They come from control engineering. The idea is that if you want to control the process to ensure that we, at the end, get into something reasonable or useful or as desired, then we can control it basically in two ways. We can say, okay, let's do something and then check if we are doing well and then correct it if it's not going in the right direction. That is what we call a feedback approach. So let's do something intuitively or arbitrarily, then do some simulations, analyses, and evaluations, and then see if we can change something so as to minimize costs or maximize benefits and so on. The other one, which I find actually more interesting, is to do it in a feed-forward way. Can we analytically formulate the design as a scientific problem and see how it should be shaped such that it functions in the desired way, and systematically develop the design step by step? Instead of first doing something and then check it, can we do the right thing from the beginning? And these two are not mutually exclusive. They can also be combined in reasonable settings, such as cataloging all possibilities at every step in a hierarchical way and choose the best option and proceed to a lower level of abstraction. But what it takes to do this kind of feed-forward way is to start from a very neutral, non-biased discretization of space. The space, as I said, in practical terms for computing, needs to be discretized if we care about space and spatial configurations. So this is a notion that comes from continuous mathematics, the manifold. It exists, it's a smooth, and so on. It's a space that is everywhere locally smooth and similar to a Euclidean planar space. But effectively, in actual reality, when we start computing, we have to discretize it into what we call a mesh or an irregular network or a regular network. And I would prefer regular things over irregular things for many reasons, among which the neutral, non-biased structure of them. This is the same shape of a building discretized with an irregular network or a regular network. Irregular networks have their advantages when we are studying something, but when we want to come up with a new thing within this structure, I would prefer to start from something neutral like this. And these kind of networks are based on the so-called volumetric pixels or pixels. Volumetric pixels are also called voxels. And the way they're connected to each other makes these grids, which are interestingly only three. If you look at the two-dimensional versions, there are only three regular grid tilings that fill in the entire space, according to the Swiss mathematician Schalfli. And it's easy to see that they're kind of dual to each other, so the centers of these connected to each other make this one, and this one is dual to itself. So it's perfectly regular in every sense. So, and this is the kind of grid that I'm talking about. Okay, so this was a bit of background again about the methodology, but it's not only a methodology. I have been working together with my colleagues and partners on developing these tools, because I'm also a teacher, so I preach a lot when I teach, but I also like to show them how to practice what I preach. So this is why I've been developing these tools along with research. So these tools are all publicly available. There will be links that you will get. What these tools do is, this was the first one I started with. This tool called Syntactic does real-time space syntax or spatial network analysis for parametric and generative design. It helps architects to study a program of requirement and visualize it in terms of a bubble diagram, then study the graph structure in terms of centralities, at least according to space syntax theories, and then start synthesizing their space. I will show you an example how this works, step by step, according to what they want to achieve with the centrality structure. The other one, from which I showed you already a few examples, is for configurables, is for network centrality analysis or accessibility analysis. It provides tools for studying easiest path, accessibility measures based on easiest paths, and centrality measures also based on easiest paths. This one helps with discretization of space in terms of voxels and creating fields based on those voxels, and these fields can also be based on the initial graphs or networks. And with these fields, we can also get the shape of the built environment based on the graph structure. This is an example that hopefully shows you in more concrete terms what these tools can do. So if we say that we have these spaces in our building and they need to be connected in a particular way, and the architect knows, so the architect starts connecting them and even decides on the adjacencies or the light requirements coming from east, west, north, and south, and so forth. And then the tool untangles and reveals the network structure as clearly as possible to show what is intended to be built. And then the architect said that I want them to be connected in such and such ways, but the architect didn't say how they can be compacted into a map or a layout or a plan. And this one finds the maps or the plans that can actually realize that kind of structure. And because we didn't say how they can be put together or pushed towards each other, they can be pushed towards each other like this. In this green space can be brought next to the blue one, or these two can be brought together. And so there are two ways to triangulate this, as to which we can see how all these polygons can be triangulated, and therefore we can create a catalog of possibilities. And don't worry, there are not too many, which is good news in computational terms, because this is not infinity, this is not this is actually countable. There are many, but there are not too many in computational terms. And then we can further see which one can work best in terms of what we care about. For instance, it can be the lighting or the way they can be fit for accommodating the certain areas that we want to realize in the right places. And one of the ways they can be kind of inflated or realized, concretized, is to place these kind of bubbles that are visible enough, and they end up being rectilinear when they're pushed hard towards each other. Or we can grow them out of these voxels or volumetric pixels in the locations wherever they are. This, I'm sure, looks very abstract, but I will quickly show you some more concrete examples of how students use these tools and continue developing them further and use them in their designs, these methods actually. So the idea is that we start from something rather abstract, which is close to the functional description. We gradually make it more and more concrete, and we get into the design. And it's a step-by-step, so if you make mistakes and want to edit something, we can always go back and change those things. So these are, I'm not going to read through all these links. As I said, I will publish the slides so you can see for yourself the links to the tools and papers related to those tools. So these are examples, I would say perfect examples from the works of our students in a course where we teach them how to design in this way. And the course is focused on teaching architects the basics of computer science and mathematics as far as they pertain to built environment and architecture. And as you can guess, it's all based on the configurative design approach. Starts from voxels, discretization of the space, and then doing the analysis and evaluations first. So we start with the evaluation. That's what we mean by feed forward. We do the evaluation, for instance, in this case, we find the solar envelope. We make sure that the building doesn't affect the rights of neighbors to natural daylight, and we remove the parts that are obstructing neighbors. And then the other analyses come into play. We study connectivity, noise, sunlight, and then by putting these analyses together, literally we synthesize at least the basis for the design. So synthesis is a word for putting different analyses together and making a conclusion out of them. By putting them together, we find out that some spots are better for certain functions because they have such and such preferences about noise, light, etc., etc. And then we grow them as we start by putting these seeds, when we grow them into these larger volumes, and then this is what we call the massing, and then eventually we put the volumes together with the circulation and we get to the final design. And I would like to emphasize that this, at the end, it looks like a normal building. It doesn't look like something built by Martians or whatever. So it looks very normal. So many people say, okay, so what? You did all this to design this building. No, the point was not to design this building, which, by the way, I was not very happy with the aesthetics at the end, but I think the student did an amazing job in every other sense. But the point is that we're making a process. It can be applied to another location. It can be edited by people. People can participate in it. People can specify what they want to achieve with the building, and the process gives different results. So it's not so that we're making a building and we're just making our lives and students' lives more difficult. They're learning to get this building out of a piece of a computer program, and it's a computer program they developed with care and passion, and it works. So, and another example, the same site, the same program of requirements for a housing complex, urban housing complex. Same approach, but slightly different preferences and so on. They arrived at a different design and a different model to some extent. So, and here I think maybe you can see better that by putting these analyses together and checking exactly their intentions about which space requires what kind of things, like what are the preferences of these spaces for being close to the public space or having a better light or an indirect light from north and things like that, then they can objectively decide to place them somewhere where those requirements or preferences are met. And then again, they grow the circulation and they grow these masses of spaces, and then at every layer, the plans are worked out. I have, by the way, more examples, but I've shortened the slides. I hope I'm not running out of time. Yeah. And yes, these are the parametric design tools that we use, but as you can, I hope you can see, but if you cannot see, these are, 95% is programmed by the students, and they had most of them had no idea of programming before starting this course, and they learned it all within this course. Yeah, and they're bachelor students, so this is their minor. And at the end, I would say I've kind of prefer the look of this one, which is a matter of fine-tuning at the end, but throughout the process, they have grown this building in a way, and then they also grown different variants, and at the end, they could compare and choose the optimal one, the one which would respond better to the initial requirements and preferences and wishes. And they really got the point. So in this diagram, I think they beautifully described what the building is all about. Around this building are streets, and these streets are kind of public and so on. So they divided into sectors. They really studied and specified and expressed the requirements or how they perceive the concept as a spatial concept rather than a formal concept. And then gradually they arrived at the building shape. It is a very objective and editable process. This is another version of the same thing, almost, a manual version. So it doesn't, I believe that computation can also be done on paper. So it has existed for thousands of years. We still are using some algorithms developed by Babylonians, and these things can be done on a piece of paper. So, and that is what I'm preaching for the first year or second year bachelor students. I designed this as a kind of a game to draw their attention to the fact that we are supposed to design a space that is logical and functional, not only a form. So they start by looking at the spaces as walking spaces, standing spaces, and sitting spaces for sitting or stationary people and objects. And then the idea is to connect functional spaces by only rectangles and ramps and stairs and corridors. And then they had an assignment to design an extension for the Escher Museum, which, by the way, is a perfect spot because Escher was perhaps the most successful artist in describing some of these mathematical and topological concepts in an artistic way. So the building is an underground building in front of the Escher Museum. It's an imaginary setup, but the point is that they could, in about 8 weeks, without any starting knowledge on how to design or how even to draw in a computer, they could just follow the rules of the game and create these interesting, playful spaces for different user experiences, different ways of experiencing this space put together in a maze-like structure. Different examples with the same idea to make it as interesting as possible. So these starting points are usually graphs that describe the intended user experience within the space. And then they put together this system of corridor circulation network. And then from there, they arrive at the shape, not the other way around. Okay, so to conclude, I find this an interesting challenge, the 1 million homes by 2030. And the thing is, this has been done before. After the devastations of the Second World War, the Netherlands has managed to build almost 1 million homes, if I mistake not. So this is possible. But back then, because of the sense of urgency and crisis, it was necessary to be as efficient as possible. I think nowadays we afford to also think about effectiveness more carefully, because we want to make sure that they're sustainable and sustainable in every sense, like socially sustainable, economically sustainable, and environmentally sustainable. So if you do the math, you will see that if 1 million homes are supposed to be developed within 10 years, and if every year that I'm rounding up numbers has 50 weeks or so, then 1 million divided by 500 means that 2,000 homes must be developed per week. And there are roughly 10,000 to 18,000 architects within the Netherlands. Again, if I mistake not, but if I have made a mistake, so I'm happy to correct them. But it's about this number, the registered, non-registered architects. So that means more or less that 2,000 groups of 5 to 9 architects producing one unique home every week are required. And I would say, speaking of social and economic sustainability, we need approaches that are more participatory. So our vision for, we envision that in future, the successful approaches will be participatory approaches, and they will be almost like games. And I've forgotten to include something very important here, an announcement for a project that we are doing right now. It's called Ontwerpen and Overheid. It's about the relation between policy making and urban planning and governmental regulations on design with gaming, and gaming as a means of designing. I will add that in the slides, in the later version of the slides, and share some links about that as well. Just a little bit about myself. This is, as I told you already, this is a long story of fascination with graphs and their applications in design and analysis of built environments. This is a link to my PhD dissertation on the subject. As I said, I have a hybrid background in architecture, design, and control engineering or electrical engineering. And long story short, I found the best spot in the world for doing my PhD at the chair of design informatics with Seville, which was right in between my two fields of interest, mathematics and computer science and architecture. And these are links to those tools that I mentioned already. These are some of the courses that I teach right now. In all these courses, what connects them together is this generative approach to design, which is based on forming the space and eventually also forming the shape based on those spatial configurations. This one is about, which is at least on the surface not directly related to this talk, but it's based on the same approach. It's for designing refugee housing built with earth on refugee camps. This one is the minor spatial computing, from which I showed you examples already. These are two courses from the Y Factory. And in all these courses, I teach basics of the mathematics that pertains to space, like geometry, topology, and graph theory, and programming in C# and Python. And they're all kind of about computational design, spatial analysis, synthesis, simulation, and optimization. I would like to thank, first of all, Seville for being so accepting and tolerant about my super abstract approach to design all these years. My partner in life and work, Sama, she's been helping me and with development, and she's been my chief editor for a long time. Engineer Hans Ochemum, my colleague, who is also a very enthusiastic teacher, always with me in doing all these experimental approaches in education. Sherwin, a new researcher on our team who has had many inputs for these processes. Cemre, a very smart PhD student. She's also working on serious problems of configurations in hospitals. That's about it. Thanks for your attention.